Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Rendezvous with myself and yourself and the divine intelligence underlying all things. Divine intelligence, please open the door. Don't wait for me in some distant utility store where I won't know you're there, and neither go to some random field, but come to me in my own sweetheart and put some little mistletoe above us so we can start to make out what's real. Okay. I'm going to talk about what is culture, because that's something that I used to find a bit baffling. Like, one of those things, I don't know if it's just me, but it kind of like gets under my skin when there's an idea that, and you feel like it's meaningless, like it's just something people put out there because they've got some other agenda going on, personal or transpersonal, and they have this empty idea that doesn't really make sense. And so culture, I thought, like, people talk about there's more culture here, or that's our culture. What is that? Is that even real, or do I just not understand it? What's going on? But basically, Jordan Peterson helped me understand this a lot better, like the kind of metaphysics of culture, like what is it? Um, he said something, but yeah, and just over, through thinking this through, I've come to I think, a pretty simple, clear view, which you may not have heard, but I think was useful for, just good to know, but also for practically in life, it's good to be aware, like, what is culture? Because it's there, very important. So his book, Maps of Meaning, it begins with, I think the quote is something like, something you can't see protects you from something you don't understand. And it's talking about how culture protects us from just the pure chaos of the unknown, and that's terrifying. What often scares us most is the unknown, uncertainty. But the unknown can be promising and threatening. Or there could be good stuff, or there could be bad stuff. It's like the dragon and the gold, And so it's a very primal thing that all creatures have, because whenever you're operating in the world, you could get these two forces. But basically saying that culture is kind of like this memory bank of all our ancestors, and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so it doesn't mean that it's perfect, but it's like from all the countless experiments that have been run about how should we live and to try to survive and then also thrive if possible, these are the conclusions. This is what we have got so far. This works, that didn't work, and that's culture, and it's transmitted basically so we can just survive and not have, not get eaten, and hopefully thrive and actually be happy. And basically, the way he puts it in the book, it basically posits these three levels of reality. So you've got nature, culture, and then the individual. So the individual, like you or me, we're kind of, we have mother, which is nature, basically, the divine mother, like, just all gives all, but it's kind of both sides though. It's like, chaos, and it's also like, abundance. And then the father is culture. And so culture, like the can be the wise king who provides order, sets rules so everyone can operate within it, and kind of, maintain stability amongst the fluctuations of the natural world, and so that we can live and explore and figure things out. And but then in its dark side, the culture or the father can be totalitarianism, or collectivism, where it's these kind of very rigid views, which are forced upon people. So it's no longer like trying to help you live your life, it's trying to live your life for you and force you, take away your freedom. But anyway, that's just the backstory. So basically, what is culture? I think culture is beliefs and behavior. So beliefs being what you think, and then behavior, like how you act, what you do. So basically, we can act we can move our body and do things. You could include moving your mouth, speaking as action, right? And then thinking, which in a way you could call action, but it's kind of like, so what you, but I guess it's more of a state really, because you could use thinking as an action. We can say, oh, I'm thinking, give me a moment. That's an action, active action verb. Or you could use a state verb, a stative verb, like, oh, I think chocolate is delicious. Like, I believe it's delicious. I feel it's delicious. It is delicious for me. So basically, in that sense of, what we believe or what we think, it's in your mind, and then all the movements of your entity, you could say, is behavior. And that's what culture is basically, is patterns of, so it's like a collective personality. So your personality, you have your beliefs, what you think, so what you think is right and what's wrong, okay? And then you have your behavior, which is basically flowing on from what you believe to be right and wrong, including your views on how much your behavior has to conform to your beliefs, and how much you can just follow your animal instincts every now and then, or all the time for some people. And so that's it. And so then culture is like this collective version of that. So it's like, say if you take 100 Irish people, they're going to be different from each other. But then, and you take 100, I don't know, let's say Cambodians, okay, and they're going to be different from each other. But if you will be able to notice that within the 100 Irish people, they're much more similar to each other than the Cambodians are to them. And likewise, within the Cambodian group, they are much more similar than they are to any of the Irish people, And so there will be some extremes where there's some Irish people who are really, really, really different to the Cambodians. And then there'll be a minority of Irish people who are actually pretty similar to Cambodians. And same thing for the Cambodians. So it's this kind of like a bell curve, like a normal distribution, where most people are in the middle, but there are extremes. And anyway, that's like us with our personality. On like some days we act a bit different, but it's our general nature, the general pattern of belief and behavior. So it's like kind of this collective personality that's been transmitted through time. And when we're raised by our parents, we're taught to, they have to try to program us so that we have, because it's hard to change habits when you're older. So they try to instill certain beliefs and behavior in us that will help us thrive when we're older. And I believe that, parents are not just friends, they're there to give you good energy and all that, but their primary role is to guide you and set you up for a successful life, to ingrain in you these beliefs and behaviors, which when you're older, you can then build upon and change as you see fit. But you will have the freedom to do that because you won't be burdened by all this counterproductive, dysfunctional behavior. And, if your parents don't lovingly set a limit on something they believe is bad, then, your boss or your soon-to-be ex-girlfriend or whatever will set that limit, and probably in a much less loving way. So that's, culture being transmitted. And so it's we can always turn away from it. You can, there's two ways to be influenced by someone. You can do what they say, or you can not do what they say. You can non-conformism is also can be reactionary sometimes. People doing what their parents say, or doing the exact opposite of what their parents say in a very extreme, knee-jerk manner, that's kind of probably fairly common. Or I say doing what they do. If they're good role models, that's probably the most common, for sure. Because it's good for you. It makes things easier. They're solving problems for you. Oh yeah, you know what's going on. Help me. Life is confusing. I want to learn. Kids generally trust their parents until they have a bad experience and a reason to doubt it. But then also there will be some people who, their parents try to instill a culture in them, but they kind of just have their own very, very willful or very independent-minded, and they will, kind of find their own path. Nonetheless, this is basically, culture is beliefs and behavior being passed down over generations. And so there's a culture, a personality is kind of an individual culture. And then a family is a bit of a larger scale culture, where, the individuals in the family will be different to each other, but they're more similar to each other than they are to all the other people around the neighborhood in general. and for each family it's the same. The families, you could kind of look at the people's personality scores if you studied them, and in general you could probably put people into family groups. You could figure out, like, in general, there's certain, it's quite subtle, at that level, but there are differences between the different families. And then, about what, and I should say that beliefs and, yeah, okay, beliefs and behavior. I'll go into a bit more detail in a second what that means, but yeah, and then also with, cities or towns, villages, whatever, they're groups of families, many families together. They too, same thing. They're all different, different villages. Well, the village altogether has many differences within itself. The families are all different, but they're more similar than they are to, say, these other villages. The families from here are different. Oh, they're all quite similar compared to the families over the valley, and so on upwards to, like, country, continent, world. And yeah, so beliefs and behavior. Beliefs I would divide into two things. So it's right and wrong, but that has two forms. It's about what is and what should be. So descriptive and prescriptive. So you've got right and wrong, meaning true and false, like descriptive, like what is real, what exists. And then you've got right and wrong, meaning good and bad, like prescriptive or normative. What should you do? And so in those two senses, it's like belief is like what exists and what should be, how should we act? And that's basically it. This is what you think in your head. And when we talk about values, that's kind of thing, that would be the more normative side. It's like what should be. So sometimes you have beliefs and values, beliefs being what is, and then values being what should be. Like, should we get very educated? Should we do whatever our parents tell us? Should we dress modestly and cover our faces, like, and not let other people see us or whatever? These are all what should we do, rather than say, what is. Just like, oh, does the earth go around the sun? Does the sun go around the earth? Whatever. Is evolution real? Is God real? And is love real? Is truth real? Can we get to a universal truth, an objective truth through discourse? So, but in this case, I'm using, instead of beliefs and values, I'm just using the word beliefs for both. So that's it. And then behavior. Of course, that's the way people act and what they do, their habits, their routines, their ways of acting in the world. But it would include, you could split off from that if you wanted. Well, I should say, with beliefs, attitudes you could split off from that if you want a more sophisticated picture of what culture is, or you could just keep it as part of belief. But that would be, I think, an attitude is your kind of general way of viewing things. When you learn something, how do you perceive it? What lens does it go through? And I think that's basically informed by your experiences and what you think it is and what you think should be. So I would have that's all part of beliefs, let's say. Keep it simple. Behavior, that could also include, like, food is something you're doing. What do you do with the food? What do you grow? How do you store it? How do you process it? And how do you cook it? How do you eat it, with your hands or with knives and forks? That's all behavior. It's all actions. Of course, you might want to split it off, but let's put it there. And then architecture and art. That's also things you're doing. It's an action, and it's a little bit special, like food, I guess. Food's very delicious. That's why it's special. But it's also, I guess, food is like a very important activity where we bond with, your group. You sit around the table together and you're like, we did it. We accomplished another meal. We're not dying. We're living. It's a celebration of sorts. But then, art and architecture, they're also, the way, what do you do? How do you build things? What kind of, Ireland, say, has usually rather small buildings, like a few stories high, like 4 stories, 5 stories would be quite the biggest you see in the old buildings. Now there's newer buildings that are going up, which are huge. Some of them ugly. A few of them look good, I will admit. But, so that's kind of the culture of how you're building things. That's the style. Whereas in some other countries, they're like, we just want, like, really big buildings. That's cool, shiny, modern, new, And there's that culture coming into Dublin, say, for example, that you got both there, kind of. But anyway, so and art, you're painting, you're making music, you're writing books, etc. So these now, I would say art and architecture, I guess, is a form of art, but although it's also related to accommodation, housing, so it's a special kind of art. But I think the purpose of art is a special kind of behavior within culture, and this links to what I'm going to finish with, which is why should we care about what is culture, have a clear picture of it, and then what should we do about it, But basically, I think art is a mechanism by which culture is explored and stored. So rather than just through experience of the eons and just, through art, we can explore stories and learn things. We can have, buildings. We can make a building and go, oh, doesn't really look very good. And then another building, oh, that's a good building. And, the people who make good buildings get more popular and other people copy them. And there's this kind of decentralized network of creation which helps focus us on what is good and beautiful or good and worthy. And in the current age, I think a lot of architecture has lost sight of that. In my humble opinion, it doesn't really inspire. In many cases, it depresses, because I think it's people who just have a very utilitarian view of things. Of it's just about making money, having a building that, or it looks very shiny and tall, and and they might not like the flowery, kind of older stuff, or they might think it's old-fashioned. They might have some sort of belief in their personal culture that old-fashioned is bad. Whereas I would say, no, old-fashioned things in many cases are better than the modern stuff. In some cases, yeah, they're worse, but it's not all. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That would be part of my beliefs, right, in my culture. So, but some people would go, no, what's new is always best. That's why it's new. That's their belief, Who's right or wrong? Well, let's run the experiment. Let's find out who has better results, That's what we're doing with cultures through the world. So it's so for exploring culture, you can learn things about what exists, what's real, and what is right. Or like what's true and what is real. What's true and what is good. The two versions of what's right. And so you can explore that through art in many ways and see and try to share it with among the community and help other people explore it. Maybe the artist knows perfectly well what they're trying to say, but maybe there's people who are going to watch that movie or read that book who don't really, and so they can read it and they can share. They can explore it for the first time. So it's helping other people explore and learn these things. So it's a transmission of culture, and that's where it gets to that storing thing. It's a way of storing culture, your beliefs and your behaviors, which you've accumulated through time and believe these are good for the culture, these are good, or the society, that's the people. This is our culture, this is our memory bank, which simplifies the infinitely complex task of life. Say, hey, you can tweak with the edges of this, and you should, because conditions change, nature changes, so culture has to adapt for the mother and the father helping the son, the individual. So you need to keep tinkering at the edges. Say certain cultures, maybe, I think it's good that religions, maybe in some cases, being very strict, maybe it made sense. But then over time, it's like, we're in a new age, I think it makes sense to adapt and go, oh yeah, okay, we've got all this information about, maybe it was not literally true in some cases, the stuff in the religious books, maybe we should adapt. Or say it's like, throw out all the religion, nothing's real. Then, okay, that's not really working so well. The societies who do that have crises of meaning, or meaninglessness, more accurately. And so, skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, violence, etc. Violence actually going down globally, but I believe. According to Steven Pinker. Anyway, but nonetheless, well-being seems in general to be plummeting. Although in a minority of people it's soaring. The minority are getting wiser and more aware of what is good for us, and developing that, but it seems like unfortunately the majority are sliding in the other way. That seems to be the strange way the 80-20 principle is working. But um, nonetheless, so we're through art, right? Yeah. So you're exploring and storing this culture so that people can access it, and you can be sure, like, we have paintings around here, we have movies, we have stories like books, we have sculptures, we have architecture, um, and people can go. You can take your kids, who are still growing, and or your teenagers or whatever, and there'll be different artworks which um, are more relevant for each of them. But it's there's a lot of it. It's not like a straight answer. This is the answer. It's like we're exploring the topic, and we might have some views of what's possibly true, but often we don't really know. But it's a way of, just by exploring it, you get the ideas of the field of, like, possibilities. And so through exploring, you go to these galleries, you look at these paintings, and you read these stories with these lessons and these characters with their motivations and what happens when they've got this nature or that nature, and so on. And you get a sense of that beauty. A lot of art, I guess, is just trying to communicate the sacred beauty of the present moment. And so it can kind of maybe call out to you and go, oh, what is that? There's a feeling. There's some beautiful, sacred feeling. I felt it. How can I get there? Maybe I think some art has that mystical kind of purpose, where it's not trying to communicate information, but it's just trying to touch you with the feeling that anyone can access if they can just turn off their mind and be fully awake without thinking in the present moment. If you want to learn how to do it, read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's a manual for spiritual enlightenment. Basically, it's exactly that. It's like you can be fully awake without thinking. And actually, that is the highest state of wakefulness for humans, it seems, But, and yeah, very revolutionary state of mind, very enjoyable. So I think that can also be a purpose of art. But nonetheless, and that you also need a certain amount of that in the culture, I think, for balance. People who are connected, like children are, or great artists are, or something, to that field of sacred feeling which unites us all, and which I would say in general women seem to be more connected to it than men in general. Men are more often up in their heads, which explains why the majority of the criminals and monsters through history are men. Um, but yeah, although ultimately we're equal, obviously, or in my culture, my beliefs. So yeah, okay. So art can be a mechanism to kind of explore and share and store culture. But it is ultimately it's a very special behavior, but it is a behavior. It's something we do, right? So you got these behaviors based upon what you believe, and then they can also help generate, results which can then inform your beliefs, like, about what's real and what is good. And then that can then feed back into more adaptive behavior. And so this is basically what culture is. And now, great. So that's important because, like, look, I could say, oh, existential love is real, the universe is alive. You could call it God if you wanted, but you don't need to use that word. But you could call it source, or infinity, or love, or life, or reality, or nature, or the cosmos, the universe, whatever. Self, capital S, self, emptiness, whatever, being. So I could, but I'll go lowest common denominator, because maybe that's not a belief you have, and I want to be practical with this transmission, to try to help as many people as I can. And so basically, I think we don't, it's very natural throughout history that chaos returns, right? Nature is absolute chaos, animals eating each other, things killing, life eating life, eating life, eating life, And so I don't want to get eaten. I don't want my family to get eaten or killed. And I imagine you don't want to be killed, and you don't want your family to be killed, or your neighbor, And so, on a very basic level, we don't want to die, we don't want to be sick, we don't want to be extremely uncomfortable. We want to at least be able to survive and hopefully thrive. Okay, so how do we avoid hell? How do we, never mind getting heaven, which we can as well, but like, I mean, heaven in the sense of like a beautiful, better earth. But just in the basic level of, like, say, this very great danger at the moment of creeping and not so creeping anymore, kind of starting to pick up speed, totalitarianism, collectivism, people saying you don't have the right to do what you want, even though you're not hurting other people. We tell you what's right, and it's the group that matters. It's not the individual. You don't matter, and the individual can and should be sacrificed for the group. You know, that's one culture, and I believe it's a toxic and misguided, foolish culture. But other people, they disagree, and that's their belief, and they have behaviors which flow on from it, and they will be willing to lie and do all kinds of crazy stuff because they genuinely believe it's good, and they have their beliefs about what's good and what's real, and they differ from mine. I believe, if you're not hurting others, you have absolute divine right to keep doing it. It's your life. You know. Um, and so just on a basic level of, like, keeping society going, making sure we have enough food and everything, we need to regenerate culture. We need to store culture, keep it, maintain what we have, not forget. Like, if there's a big apocalypse, there will be a mass forgetting of of the beliefs and behaviors of the past, the ways of living, and there'll be huge cultural loss, and that's like a real serious problem. Um, and it seems like it happened before. You know, look at Graham Hancock's work if you're interested in that. Uh, Magicians of the Gods, Fingerprints of the Gods, America Before, or his Netflix documentary Ancient Apocalypse. Probably the easiest way to get into it. 6-part documentary, really, really good. Basically, there's very good evidence that there was a lost civilization 12,000 years ago. Earth got hit by a comet around then, sea levels rose by 100 meters, and there's all this, quite persuasive, real scientific evidence from many different domains that there was this culture, and it passed on some of what it knew, to others, but a lot of it was just lost, and we totally forgot about it, except in a few stories here and there, until modern science has given us the tools to go and check things and bring information together, and it seems like actually there was this mass forgetting. So that can happen, or the Dark Ages. The Roman Empire fell, Europe forgot all this stuff, and Ireland had to go out and kind of recolonize, kind of spread literacy and knowledge and learning throughout Europe again by forming monasteries. But anyway, hence the land of saints and scholars name. But anyway, so I think we all have a responsibility, or you could say an opportunity, or I would say from my culture, from my beliefs, we have a responsibility or an obligation to try to help maintain healthy culture. With our own culture, storing what we, helping maintain in the storage of, like owning books and, owning, music and knowing how to play an instrument. So you're a memory vessel of how to play an instrument or how to speak a language. I'm learning Irish. I want to maintain that. I want to be a storage so I can pass that on. But all kinds of things like this, where to help do your part to store and explore, but by culture, and to share culture with others, including your family and friends and stuff. Like, oh, let's watch a movie. Oh, let's have a book club. Or let's go to a play, or whatever. Or let's play some sport, our country's sport, maintain that. Or, cook food for Christmas or whatever. You're like, here I'm in the Czech Republic, and the Czech traditions, Bohemian traditions, are really beautiful, and it's much more developed than, say, in Australia where I grew up. But there's, pros and cons to both, but it's really cool, they maintain these traditions. So doing that, and then if you can, creating, artworks of your own. So exploring art through making your own poetry, making your own stories, making your own food, or making, recipes, although that's a bit different, but okay. But like these things which help refine our view of what's right, you know, what's right, what's wrong, you know, on those two levels that we talked about, and how we should therefore behave. Um, I think it's a great thing as much as you can be part of that. Maybe it's just through receiving it and kind of passing it on, or maybe it's through adapting it and kind of, you know, creating your own works of, you know, music or whatever it is that help either connect people to that feeling, that sacred feeling that unites culture or societies, or to something which has something to teach us in terms of belief and behavior. Um, and by doing this, we can, um, most importantly, avoid nightmares. You know, um, a lot of people, uh, say people from Eastern Europe, they'll be more aware of this than people from Western Europe, for example, where people in Eastern Europe, they remember, you know, from communism only fell like, what's it now, 30 years ago. And a lot of people there, they still remember, like, yeah, there was some, maybe there's some good points to things, whatever, you know, it's life, you know, of course there's gonna be some good stuff. But people remember that, you know, the tragedy and the nightmare of what went on where the government had complete control and there's so much corruption and, you know, heartbreak and people just disappearing in the middle of the night, being taken away. And um, that can happen anywhere, and it's happening right now. If you think that couldn't happen here, well, why is it happening in North Korea right now? You know, that happens in 2023, you know, almost 2024. Um, why couldn't it happen there, where you are? You know, like the answer is it can happen. The only thing holding it back is culture, your beliefs and your behavior. If you have the right culture, you will protect yourselves from going down those roads. Because if you have a large enough minority of, say, you got 20% of the population or something who are savvy and understand what's right, then you can protect yourself from dark, you know, wolves in sheep's clothing trying to lead everyone to the slaughterhouse because they think it's good. You know, that's their culture, wolfish culture. They think, hey, you're a sheep, I'm a wolf. This is nature. I eat you, and it tastes good. If I don't do it, how am I going to feed my little wolf babies? You know, and we go, yeah, fair enough, wolf. That's right. You're correct. That is in your nature, and it's also in our nature to protect ourselves and develop the flourishing of our civilization. And so, you know, if the wolves come too close, then I believe, from my culture, I'm not a pure pacifist. I believe in self-defense and killing wolves. If they, you know, if it's us or them, yeah, okay, sorry, wolf, you know. But understanding the big picture that, you know, ideally, yeah, I mean, it's wolves, you need them there. You need that, that's part of nature. You need that dark presence, you know. Um, I'm using wolf as a metaphor here, obviously, but anyway, so I think, but yeah, we, to avoid these, you know, dark futures, which are very possible, and even just the decline and mediocrity of our culture, if it's just a boring or a sad or a depressed or an anxious culture, you know, we don't need that. Who wants that? Let's have an amazing life. Let's have a beautiful, expansive, curiosity burning, you know, culture, which is just, you know, lit up with, you know, interest and gratitude for the gifts we find and we enjoy. And so, but then, so the survival is the basic reason why we need to, I would encourage everyone to kind of consume and create as much culture, so to speak, as you can. Um, Getting involved, excuse me, getting involved in like not just art, like, you know, but just in general, trying to understand what is my culture, what are the beliefs, and what are the behaviors, and try to refine them. Go, okay, what should we get rid of, and what should we expand, or what's something we should add, maybe from overseas. Oh, another country, yeah, we should add this. That's good. Um, and so kind of cultural maintenance, you know, um, and yeah, so that's basically it. Like, yeah, what should we get rid of? What should we maintain? And what should we add? And you can do that through, you know, creating and experiencing or consuming art, but also just in general being part of your society and keeping your eyes open and understanding what culture is in beliefs and behavior, so that you can try to be an active neuron, a cell which is in the brain of the collective culture, in your family, in your community, in your culture at large, and in your country and in the world. And I think especially the culture of individualism, or a balanced individualism, where it's not like, oh, screw you all, I do whatever I want, often just by materialist consumption. No, but like true individualism, which is, I will pursue the best interests of this branch, and therefore I must pursue the best interests of the tree, because the branch is the tree is the branch. But you don't let the branch wither. You're like, no, I'm focused on the branch. The other branches focus on themselves. I focus on myself. That is how the tree is healthy. And so, your country, let your country focus first on your country, making things well. But understand that if you try to chop off or hurt the other branches of other countries, you are truly only hurting yourself, because you are not just your country, you are the whole world. You are humanity. We are all nature. We're all humanity. So, on a basic level, I think it's just good to know what culture is. But I think for those cold to it, I would encourage you all to kind of understand there's a very noble, eternal, timeless purpose in those within the population who really seek to be well read and to be well versed in the culture, and to try to serve the best interests of letting it flourish and bloom as much as possible. And that goes in waves naturally, but to try to make the lows higher and the highs higher, and a good one final thing I'd say is like traveling is very good for this, learning about the other ways around the world that people live, and consuming their culture, their art, But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot to be gained, but we are products of our own culture, and so it's natural that when we should be aware that other people are very likely to hold on to their culture, and that it's okay. I'd say for Europeans or Westerners, a very important lesson. I'm reading a book, great book, highly recommend at the moment, almost finished, called The Strange Death of Europe. Terrifying book, but very, very good book, full of lots of insights, and very balanced look at a crazy, complex issue. But by Douglas Murray, The Strange Death of Europe. And but I think Europeans or Westerners really need to be aware that we too are humans, and we have the right to have our own culture and our own ways, and to not be always apologizing for who we are. Just because the great empires in recent history have been European or European spin-offs, doesn't mean that Europeans should be ashamed or guilty or like are worse than others. It's like, there have been plenty of empires from the Middle East, Africa, Asia, all doing the same thing, And even these days, there's certain imperialist governments who are doing similar things, say, which, I won't mention today for, no need, but, like there's darkness all over, the world, in everyone. So, but, so, every culture, I think, met a German once who was like, oh, I'm so ashamed of being German. I was like, it just seems so unhealthy. Why would you think that? That's crazy. There's so much good stuff about Germany as well as the bad, So I think we should all kind of, with our own selves, with our personality, and with our family, and with our community, and with our countries, and with humanity as a whole, and the universe as a whole, we should have mercy, not just, the quality of mercy be not strained, as Shakespeare said. So balance justice, your, executing of the will of right and wrong, balance that with an awareness of mercy and saying, yeah, like be gentle with ourselves, yeah, we've done bad things, but let's focus on the good and try to make the good better. Be productive, be practical. Don't wallow in our misery and just cause more misery. So, yeah, I think for our own basic survival, but also just well-being and flourishing on all levels, personal, familial, community, and culture. We really, it behooves us to be cultural beings and to learn instruments, read books, try to expand our minds and our hearts. And so Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And yeah, may may all cultures, you know, follow their own paths, and may we soften our sharper edges, and may we be open to learning from each other, and may we be tolerant and gracious enough to accept when others are going down different paths. If it's not hurting others directly or hurting us directly, then they have the right to go down a path, even if we think it's misguided. And so may all cultures and people explore life and live to the best of our ability. So, thank you. That's it. I'll see you around. See you in 2024. Woo!